Good morning. Ms. Graham, who's the first witness today?
The first witness is Alan Pearson.
Good morning, Mr. Pearson. You're going to be asked questions by Ms. Graham, but before that, I'll put you on oath. So would you raise your hand and say the words of the oath? I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that I will tell the truth,
that I will tell the truth,
the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Ms. Graham.
Good morning, Mr.
Morning.
Pearson. You're Alan Pearson,
Yes.
and the inquiry have been provided with all of your contact details and such like.
Okay.
Thank you. I'd like to refer you to your statement. You've kindly given the inquiry a statement, and that is SBPI 00085. But you'll see a black folder in front of you
Yep.
as well, Mr. Pearson, and you'll see that there are hard copies, paper copies in that folder. Now, as well as your inquiry statement, you should also have a couple of other statements as well in there. So I just wanted to let you know, if at any time you want to look at the hard copy, please feel free to do so. They're for your use, if
Right.
you wish. But when I take you through those documents, it'll also come up on the screen in front of you.
Okay.
And in fact, you'll see now that your witness statement to the inquiry is on the screen, and it says it was taken via the telephone on Tuesday the 5th of April.
Yep.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then would you look please at the final page? And you'll see that paragraph 35 says, I believe the facts stated in this witness statement are true. I understand this statement may form part of the evidence before the inquiry and be published on our website. And in fact, you signed all of the pages of that statement.
Yes.
Thank you. And you'll see your signature on the hard copy in front of you, but for the purposes of displaying it on the screen, we've redacted your signature.
Okay.
Can I take you to Sunday the 3rd of May 2015, around 7 in the morning? And your statements told us that at one point you were in Temple Hall Avenue in Kirkcaldy.
Yes.
And what I'm going to do is bring up a map on the screen so that we can listen to your evidence as we go through. And that's the scene overview, please, Miss Wildgoose. Now, just to let you see tell you what we see on the screen here, you'll see towards the top left, just below the top, the street Arran Crescent, and then parallel to that is a yellow street, Temple Hall Avenue.
Yes.
So that's to the left of the screen. And then if you were to travel east on Temple Hall Avenue, you would come to a street called Henry Road that travels from the top of the screen right down to the bottom.
Yep.
You know this area,
Yeah.
don't you? And then the street on the right-hand side of the screen is Hayfield Road.
Yep.
Thank you. So about 7 in the morning that day, what were you driving?
At the time, I had a silver Ford Focus.
And you were with your wife in the car?
Yeah, that's correct. I was driving her down to her sister-in-law's. They were going out for the day.
Right. Her sister-in-law or your sister-in-law?
Her sister-in-law.
Right. So you were talking about coming down Henry Road and turning right into Temple Hall Avenue.
Yep.
And you mentioned a roundabout. Do you want to point that out? You can touch the screen and a red circle will
Right.
appear.
So the mini roundabout is there.
Thank you. So you turned right into Temple Hall Avenue,
Yep.
and then you've mentioned Lockley Grove.
Yeah, so my parents live in that estate. I think it's called Lockley Terrace. The house is on the front. It is a different street.
Point that out to us, please.
So, can I zoom in? Or no? Right, okay. So those houses on the front that face onto Temple Avenue, I'm pretty sure they're called Lockley Terrace. And it was round about where I've just marked that my wife saw the individual.
So that's where the red circle with the number 2 appears on the screen. And at that stage, did you see anything yourself?
Not at that point. Obviously, early in the morning, I'm focusing on driving the car, It was my wife that turned and looked. I don't
What
know.
did she say?
She saw a man walking along the street with what appeared to be a knife in his hand. She then said to me, "That guy's got a knife." And I thought, don't be daft, you know. 7 o'clock on a Sunday morning, you don't expect anybody to be walking about. But by the time I had turned to look, I'd already driven past, so he was behind in my blind spot in the car. So I didn't actually see. It wasn't until I dropped Susan off at her sister-in-law's, she says, "Go back round and have a look." So that's what I did.
When you say he was in your blind spot, did you see the man at all?
I saw someone walking, but, you know, at that stage I didn't see clothing. You just see a person walking, you know, at that time of the morning. I don't even know why she saw it, maybe because she's not paying attention to driving the car or whatever.
Tell us where the man was when you saw him.
So there used to be a row of trees that divided the roadside and the pavement. They're all gone now, they've been taken down. So it just right sort of in between where the 2 is marked, I would say, because it was past the entrance to Cheviot Road. Because that entrance comes up quite quick after the roundabout. So
Point out Cheviot Road. I don't see that on
So-
the map myself.
Cheviot Road's there, and then it runs all the way to where number 4 is, and then joins Temple Hall Avenue again at the top of the hill.
So beside Cheviot Road,
Yeah,
the entrance.
so yeah.
So he was on the left-hand side of the street as you were driving along Temple Hall
No,
Avenue?
my right. He was on the right-hand side of the street, between the trees and the houses.
I wonder if you could point out the area where you saw the man.
So, obviously at that point, I did see a person. Again, I mean, without zooming in, probably where the 2 is marked, you know, you just see somebody walking past and that's it, a quick glimpse. And then he's too far back to really see any detail.
Where was he at the time you saw him out of the side of your eye?
How do you mean?
Well, you're driving along Temple Hall Avenue.
Yeah.
He's on your right-hand side. Was
So-
he on the road or the pavement?
No, it was on the pavement. So the road's got a verge, a grass verge, and that's where the trees used to be. Then the pavement, then the houses. So it was an old school, so the brick wall's still there to divide the pavement to the housing estate. So as I say, he was between the wall and the trees, walking along the pavement on my right.
And you dropped your wife off.
Yep. So at
And
the
then
ver-
what did you do?
At the very end of Cheviot Road, where it meets Morven Grove, at number 5, that's where my wife's sister-in-law stays. And she said to me, "Go back round and have a look." I was like, right, okay, fine. 7 o'clock in the morning. I was going to go straight home anyway. So after dropping her off, I turned the car, went back along Cheviot Road, and then back up Sidlaw. I never ever go sort of along the full length of Cheviot Road because the parking's a nightmare. There's cars on both sides of the road, so I always go up Sidlaw Street.
Right, what I'm going to do is ask you to draw a line
Right.
showing so the Miss Wildgoose will change the red circle to a line, and if you drag your finger across the screen, it'll draw one. So show us where you went from Cheviot Road.
So, just hold that. Did I just hold it down?
If you just move it off the step.
Alright. So, there, and then back up, and then back along to there. And at this point, he was nowhere to be seen. I couldn't see him on Temple Avenue or Henry Road, and you do get quite a good visibility of where the White Heather pub is.
Where's the White Heather
So
pub?
the White Heather pub is about there,
Thank you.
and another mini roundabout there at
Thank
number
you.
10. So at the mini roundabout at number 1, I then turned right to come back down towards the White Heather pub. I don't know if I can...
Do you want to
Wait a
draw,
minute.
remove that number 11 with the red circle, and do you want to draw a line
Yeah,
showing your route?
so from... Oh no, I'll not do it. So back, I know, to the mini roundabout. So between the two mini roundabouts, between 1 and 10. And then at the mini roundabout, I then went along Hayfield Road, because that's the quickest way back to where I stay.
So you turned left?
Yep. Onto Hayfield Road, and then probably maybe about to there, just past the entrance to the industrial estate at Hayfield Place.
And tell us what you saw when you got to that area.
So as I was driving along Hayfield Road, I noticed the man on my left on the pavement walking away from me towards the hospital. And as I drove along, he then crossed in the road. There was an oncoming car, and I'm sure it was a taxi, but I couldn't tell you what taxi firm it was. I don't know what the numbers were on the top of it. And it looked like he was going to flag down the taxi. Right, okay, fine, nothing untoward. I don't know if the taxi came to a full stop or whether he was travelling very slow, but it looked like he then tried to strike the top of the taxi, as if either hitting it or, you know, almost like the taxi wouldn't stop for him. And then the taxi sped off. And that's when he then turned toward and faced me and almost made the gesture as if he couldn't believe that the taxi, you know, like on a night out, if a taxi doesn't stop, you sort of go like that, you know, and put your arms out. And then that's when I saw a knife, and he's facing me in his right hand. That's when I stopped the car, thought, okay, I'm not going any further. Reversed back to the entrance of the industrial estate at Hayfield Place. I don't know if I could... So that still coming up, delete. Right. So that entrance at number 13, I reversed the car into the entrance, back first, turned and then went back towards the White Heather pub. There was another few cars coming towards me at that point, so sort of flashed my lights, put my hand out the window to stop them. And I think it was a guy in the first car, and I turn around, that guy's got a knife. But it wasn't like coming towards the cars. It's just sort of standing there, you know what I mean? And it was quite, I don't know, it maybe takes somebody maybe 20 seconds to run that distance. So it's not like I was in a hurry or anything. And then I just drove off after that. You know, once I'd told the first car, I can't even remember what make, colour it was. So driving back towards Hayfield, towards the White Heather pub, the mini roundabout at number 10, I then turned right.
Well, I don't like interrupting
No,
you,
that's
but
fine.
if you don't mind, you've given us a lot of information.
Yep.
And what I'm going to do is go through that a little bit more slowly and ask you some further questions,
Right.
if that's okay.
No worries.
So you've talked about driving into Hayfield Road, and you indicated with line 12 that you stopped at the junction with Hayfield Place.
Yep, just
And
after it.
Just after that, and there was a taxi in front of you, you thought?
Yeah, it was coming the other way. It was only other car on the road. That's why I noticed
So it was on the other side of the road?
Yeah, travelling back towards the White Heather.
And you saw the man?
Yeah.
Can you describe what the man was wearing?
If I remember correctly, a white t-shirt, what looked like quite a tight fitting t-shirt, and blue jeans, and that's all I remember. I don't know what kind of shoes he had on or anything like
Can you describe what height he was?
that. Maybe 6 foot,
And the build?
big build, not fat, but well muscled.
And what side of the road was he on?
So he was on the left-hand side of the road on the pavement, and then, as I say, crossed into the centre of the road when the taxi was coming the other way.
Where did he hit the taxi?
I'm sure it was on the roof. Like when you lean in to talk to a driver to say where you want to go or that, you know, and it looked as if it was on the roof of the taxi above the driver's door, to me.
How did he hit the taxi?
It looked like his fist, you know, sort of with his fist going down on the roof. That's what it looked like.
And you've said the taxi continued driving along
Yeah.
the road, and the taxi was travelling towards Henry Road.
Yes.
What did the man do? You've given us a brief description.
So once the taxi sped off, he'd probably do what anybody does and turned to face the taxi and to face me, although not looking at me. But when he turned around, as I say, he sort of put his hands out by his side, sort of palms up, but that's when I saw what looked like a knife in his right hand.
Do you see that on the desk we've got a panel? And I wonder, would you mind standing up and demonstrating that
Yeah.
gesture so that everyone can see?
No worries. So,
Thank you.
aye, so as a taxi's speeding past, you would turn and he sort of went like that, knife in that hand as he's facing me, so in his right hand. But that was it. There was no other movement, and that's when I stopped my car, thinking, right, okay, no further.
Was he still in the middle of the road at that stage?
It was, yeah.
And so you can sit down now, sorry. And would you be able to describe the knife that you saw?
It looked like a kitchen knife, but it didn't look serrated, so not a bread knife. Maybe the only thing I could maybe compare it to in my kitchen is the turkey carving knife that you use at Christmas, you know. Quite big in size.
What size was it?
I'm trying to think, maybe 6-7 inches. Maybe, you know, maybe a bit bigger than that.
Thank you. That looks more than 6-7
Aye,
inches to me.
Probably a bit bigger.
So what size was the blade part?
Probably that size, I would say.
And what size was the handle?
I couldn't really tell from that distance, you know. Plus, and gripped in a hand, you couldn't see the end of it. Do you know what I mean? You didn't. It wasn't poking out the other side of his hand, you know.
What colour was the handle? Could you tell?
I want to say brown, but I'm not 100% sure.
Okay.
It wasn't black. It wasn't like it didn't look plastic. Anyway.
I'd like to show you something now, please. Miss Wildgoose will hand it to you. It's
Okay.
in a plastic container. You don't need to take it out, you can just look at it through, and I'm going to ask you a question in a moment. You can touch it.
Right.
And in the meantime, Miss Wildgoose will put a photograph on the screen of what's actually contained in that container. Do you recognise that?
Not really. To me, that's a different knife, but again, from distance, you're not 100% sure.
Right, thank you. Miss Wildgoose will take that away. You've described what the man was doing in relation to the taxi. Did you form any impression at that time about his mood or the way he was acting?
No, up until the point where I saw the knife in his hand, I just thought, well, you know, the taxi's not going to stop for this guy, okay, whatever. But obviously with the wife saying that man's got a knife, it's kind of always in the back of your head, you know, what's going on here. And as I say, when When he turned to face me and I saw it, that's when I stopped.
How were you feeling at that time?
I don't know, I mean, not scared. As I say, it's not as if he was coming towards my car, you know, he was just sort of standing there. But maybe a split second, this decision just to reverse the car away from the incident.
And then, sorry, the screen has gone back. If we can get the map back. I think earlier you said to us that when you reversed along Hayfield Road, you reversed, was it into Hayfield Place?
Yes,
And then you went back towards the roundabout at Henry Road?
yes.
You mentioned earlier that you'd spoken to other drivers, another driver. Could you tell us again what you did?
So when I turned back into the road, there was another car coming towards me. So I put my window down, sort of made the gesture to stop, or at least slow down. And then when I got alongside, that's when I said to the driver that I actually pointed over my shoulder. That guy's got a knife in his hand. And then that was pretty much it as far as I remember.
Were you able to see the man at that stage?
In my rearview mirror, yes.
Where was he?
So he was sort of not in the centre line, but in the centre of the lane.
Which lane?
So I'm looking, actually looking in a mirror. I want to say the right lane.
Was he behind your car or
Yes,
on the other?
at that time he was behind my car.
So you're driving towards Henry Road,
Yep.
along Hayfield Road, and he's in the lane behind your car.
Yeah.
Was he doing it? What was he doing at that time?
Nothing, but as I say, I only looked in my mirror for a split second, you know.
And the other car that the driver you spoke to, what did they do?
As far as I'm aware, they turned in the road where they were, because it is quite a wide road. You probably could make a 3-point turn, no problem. But by that point, I had already driven off, you know, back towards the roundabout.
When you went back towards the roundabout with Henry Road, what did you do?
So I turned right to go back up the hill towards, so there's back towards the original mini roundabout that was at number 1.
Do you want to point that out on the
so-
screen again?
Back up towards that roundabout and then continued up the road, past the entrance to Hayfield, so past that entrance, and then there's a bus stop round about there, just at the crest of the hill, and that's where I stopped the car.
What did you do?
So I phoned 999 at that point.
I'd like you to listen now to a recording, and you'll hear it on in the room, and at the same time, you should have in your black folder a transcript in front of you.
Right.
So the recording is PS 404, and the transcript is SBPI, or perhaps it may be PIRC 01383.
That's that one.
And you'll see that this is a transcript of what you're going to be listening to.
Okay.
So I'll ask Miss Wildgoose to just play that through, and then I'll ask you some questions.
Police, what's the address of your emergency?
I'm not actually too sure what the address is. There's a guy in the middle of the street with a knife in his hand.
And what street is he in?
It's just along for the hospital, heading towards
I need to know what's the name of which hospital is that?
Victoria Hospital, Kirkcaldy.
Victoria Hospital in Kirkcaldy.
Heading towards Temple Hall.
Right, there's quite a few streets here. Do you know roughly which
It's the one
area
that-
is in?
It's the one that runs past the industrial estate.
But that's the Mitchelson Industrial Estate, is it? Is it a main
Aye.
road? Is it the main road he's on then?
Aye.
Can you give me a description of him?
It's a big coloured guy, quite well built, white
So is
t-shirt.
he His colour, oh hang on, I've got an incident on already. Hang on a second, just checking that. Right, so I've got it as Victoria Road.
Yeah.
The one with the knife in his hand, yeah?
Yeah.
I'll never be look at this to see what kind of a description I've got. Right, he's got a large knife, 9-inch blade.
Yeah.
Walking towards the hospital, was that correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, black male, white t-shirt, no jacket.
Yes.
Is that, can you tell me anything else at all about him?
We've
What
got
else do you think he is?
for late 30s,
So 35 to 40. What sort of build has he got?
big build,
It's large build, okay. And how tall is he?
probably 6 foot.
6 foot. Okay, what's your name, please?
It's Alan Pearson.
Alan Pearson. Okay. And is that your mobile you're calling from?
It is, yeah.
Okay, can I just quickly take your address, please?
Yes.
Can you still see him, or have you left the scene now?
No, I've left the scene. I was warning another driver because I turned round.
That's fine. Okay then, thank you very much for that.
No worries,
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah,
Is that your voice that we can hear
it is, yeah.
speaking to someone from Police Scotland?
Yes.
And that's the call that you made when you were sitting on Hendry Road.
Yep.
Is the transcript accurate?
I think so. The only thing there was that I never actually told the handler the size of the knife at the time. So at the bottom of page 2 is the call handler says a 9-inch blade, but I never actually said a 9-inch blade. I just said a knife.
So that was information that they provided you.
Yeah.
And that you're talking about the call handler's reference, he's got a large knife, 9-inch blade.
Yeah.
So that wasn't your information?
No.
Thank you. And do you see that the more than halfway down the first page, you said to say A-FO, or FOA, sorry.
Aye, but you'd spell it like PHOA, you know.
And then you use the expression, it's a big coloured guy, quite well built.
Yeah.
And the call handler says he's coloured. Using that word, do you have any sense of if that's a
Looking
word
back
that-
on it, yeah, I shouldn't have used that word. I should have just used the term black man. But at the time, it just came out.
Thank you. Can I ask you now to look at an evidence video timeline, please? What we'll do here is I'm going to put something on the screen, but if we can pause it for the moment, I'm going to explain to you what you're going to see here.
Yep.
Now you'll see on the screen in front of you, the top left-hand side, there's a grey area called real time, 7:13:16.
Yep.
And we heard evidence last week that that's the real actual time.
Okay.
And you'll see underneath there that there's 2 dark red buttons, 101 calls and 999 calls. And at some point you'll see one of them light up.
Okay.
And on the bottom left, we have dash cam footage that we've heard some evidence about from a car that was in the area. And then the top top right-hand corner is CCTV footage from Gallagher's pub, which we've also heard at one point was called the White Heather.
Yep.
And that footage is from a camera that's fixed on the public house and is looking over to the roundabout, and in the distance is Hayfield Road.
Yes.
So the road that you see spanning that, crossing that scene is Henry Road. The roundabout would travels into the distance away as Hayfield Road.
Yes.
I'm going to place some sections of this from what I'm calling phase 1 of this footage, and it'll be from 7:13:15 or 16 to 7:16:36. So it's quite a short segment. What I'll do first of all is just play that in its entirety. while I'm doing that, I wonder if you have a spreadsheet in front of you.
This one?
Yeah. And this is a copy for you to use as we go through Mr. Pearson.
Okay.
And you'll see at the beginning of that spreadsheet, on the left-hand side, there's timings given. It says video timings. There's a column on the left which gives all the timings. And there's another column, if you go further along, just after halfway, says description of visible events in video.
Okay.
And you'll see that there's a brief description given there. And as I say, what I'll do first of all is just play this footage from the times I've given. So that's 7:13:16 to 7:16:36. Thank you very much.
There's photographic evidence and these stuff. Where's it then?
It's in front of the van. I see him. I put already phone.
Might want to turn around soon, there's a car behind us now.
Go that way.
Turn round now. Now. Just turn around that wee bit there, right? I think it's your dash cam will get as well. Aye, mate, that's fine. Just in case.
Go that way.
Oh shit.
Right.
Phone him again.
Again, tell him it's actually on the road between Henry Road thing and he's doing it to various cars.
Emergency service.
Please, please.
Do you need fire, police, or ambulance?
Police. Police.
The police, thank you.
Thank you.
You are now connected to the Police Scotland 999.
Police, what's the address of your emergency?
I'm not actually too sure what the address is. There's a guy in the middle of the street with a knife in his hand.
And what street is he in?
It's just along for the hospital, heading towards...
I need to know what's...
Police, what's the address of the emergency?
I just phoned a second ago. There's a black man, white t-shirt, black trousers. He's already come on
the one that runs past the industrial
road
estate.
between Henry Road
That's
and
the
the
Mitchelson
hospital.
Industrial Estate, is it? Is it the main road he's on
Right,
there?
you've already phoned, you said, yeah?
Aye, well he's there, he's jumping out, he's trying to hit other cars. He's
Can you give me a description of him?
I didn't know what's wrong with him. It's a big
Car guy, eh?
What was your name, please?
White
Is
t-shirt.
he-
Call for 4-1 Charlie.
Right.
I need you to divert to Henry Road at the disturbance ongoing, male armed with a knife.
Thank you. So did you, if we could rewind just to the beginning of that, did you see at the first footage that we've heard evidence that's at Temple Hall Avenue, the dash cam footage? Did you recognise that street?
Yeah, looking at Hayfield Road, looking towards Victoria Hospital.
And did you recognise the man that you saw in the middle of the road in
Yes.
the first footage?
Yes.
Is that the man you saw?
Yes. 30 seconds, just after the call. I could hear I think I remember hearing sirens in the distance, but then I drove back down Henry Road, back towards where the pub is. I don't know why I did it, to be honest. Maybe just to if the police needed a point in the right direction. So as I approached the mini roundabout that is on Temple Avenue, I continued straight forward to the next mini roundabout.
I'll maybe get the map back on the screen at this stage, the scene overview. So you've explained to us that you were quite far up Henry Road. You turned and came back down Henry Road.
So,
which roundabout were you talking about there?
So those two mini roundabouts, there and there. So the first one, as I'm travelling down Henry Road, straight across at the first mini roundabout, and then obviously where the pub is at the second mini roundabout. That's when I saw, and I don't know if it was a police car or a van, I just remember seeing it coming up the hill, and I thought, right, okay, they're close enough.
Where's the hill?
So from the roundabout at number 3, where Wilson Avenue is, so between 3 and 2 is quite I wouldn't say it's a steep hill, but a hill.
But it's a hill.
Yeah. So the police were coming up on that road. That's still Henry Road, between 3 and 2.
Yeah.
And by
where
that,
did the police van go?
So it turned at the mini roundabout onto Hayfield Road.
So it turned right.
Yeah. But I continued straight on.
And where were you when you saw the police van coming up Henry Road?
If I remember, I think it turned in front of me, so I wasn't at the roundabout yet. So I was sort of between 1 and 2 as it turned into Hayfield Road. And then that's it. I just kept going straight. Okay, fine, police are on scene. That's it.
Do you remember seeing anything of the man?
No. I had a quick glance, but I couldn't see anybody at that point.
Can I ask you to look at a PERC statement, a statement you gave to PERC 00067, please? Actually, sorry, Miss Welbus, I'd like the other one, which is 00066. PERC 00066. This will be, you'll see this on the screen. You'll see this is a statement that's been prepared. Can we, it's got your name on it, Alan Pearson.
Yep.
And if we can just go down slightly, you'll see that the statement was taken on the 3rd of May 2015 at 20:55, so 5 to 9 at night, by a DC Miller and a DC Nash at your home.
Yep, that's correct.
Do you remember giving that statement? And were you given the chance to read over it, or was it read to you?
I think I think they read it back. I'm not overly sure.
Right. Could you go up a little, please, Miss Wildgoose? Sorry, down, so that I can. Thank you. And were you asked to sign that statement at any time?
I can't remember.
Okay. Would you have been trying your best to tell the police the truth at that time?
Yes.
How would your memory have been then compared to now?
Fairly fresh in your mind. But at that point, I didn't know that the person had passed away. You know, you just think it's just a police incident. You know, maybe just an arrest and that's it.
Could I ask you, Miss Welbus, to turn to page 2, please? So this is at the very top of the page. You'll see the first word on that page is this road. And I'd like to go down to paragraph 3, please, which is near the bottom of the page. And that paragraph starts, I drove back down towards Gallagher's and seen the police van coming ahead of me and turning into Hayfield Road. Do you have that?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to read this out if you don't mind. As I drove through the roundabout, I seen the male with the knife walking or standing at the bus stop on the left as you drive along the road. I seen the police van stop at him and both doors opened, and that's all I seen. The male with the knife did not brandish it or act in a threatening way on the 2 occasions I seen him. And that's noted in the statement you gave Perk on the 3rd of May, the day this happened. Would that have been the truth?
To my recollection, yes.
Seeing that now, do you remember that?
I can't say I remember the van stopping. I generally can't say I remember seeing the individual at this time.
Obviously, the chair's looking at everything that we have for you, Mr. Pearson, and we understand it was a while ago, but if what you've said today is different from what you said to Perk on the 3rd of May 2015, which version do you think the chair should prefer?
Probably the one taken on the day it happened.
Thanks. And then can I ask for a moment if we could look at the next Perk statement, which is 00067. And you'll see this is another statement given by you. And if we can just go down the page slightly, and you'll see that was taken on the 22nd of June 2015 at 17:45 by investigator Ross Stewart in the presence of trainee investigator Stuart Taylor, and that was also taken at your home address. Do you remember giving that statement the following month?
I must admit, no, I don't.
I'm going to ask you to look at a passage in this statement, which is on page 3. And Miss Wildgoose will just go through that. And I'm going to read out the first 3 paragraphs, and then I'll ask you some questions. As I was at the roundabout, I got a clear view down Hayfield Road when I saw the same black male walking back towards the direction of Gallagher's pub. That is, he was walking towards me. I got a clear view of this male, and I cannot say that I saw him in possession of a knife or anything that looked like a knife at this time. I'm certain that I saw this black male holding a knife in his left hand when I saw him earlier on Hayfield Road, but I did not see him with a knife when the police arrived. Do you have any recollection of telling Perk this when you saw him on the 22nd of June?
I can't recall. It might have been, but I genuinely can't recall anybody coming to the house a month after that.
If we were to hear from one of the investigators that they did come to your house on that date, the 22nd of June, at that time, and this is a statement that you provided then, have you any reason to think that they wouldn't be correct?
No, I wouldn't.
And on that day, again, were you, if they come and say you'd gave them a statement, would you have been trying your best to give your best recollection?
Yes.
Thank you. Do you have any recollection at all today of seeing the man in Hayfield Road that second time?
Just when he was facing me, when I stopped the car.
When you were on Hayfield
Yeah.
Road rather than when you were driving down Henry
Yeah.
Road to the roundabout? Could you just give me one moment?
Yeah.
Thank you. I've already asked him about. So, I don't know if I can turn that off. Thank you very much, Mr. Pearson. That's been very helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And are there any applications in respect of this witness? No, thank you. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Pearson. That's the end of your evidence. You're now free to go.
Okay, thanks.
Now, Ms. Graham, who's the next witness?
The next witness is Simon Rowe.
Thank you.
I don't know if there's a check.
Good morning, Mr. Rowe.
Good morning.
You're going to be asked questions by Ms. Graham, who sits at the end of the table. But before that, I'll ask you to take the oath. Would you raise your hand, please? I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God,
that I will tell the truth,
I will tell the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Ms. Graham.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Rowe. We have your name and your contact details in the inquiry, so I don't need you to say those out
No
loud
problem.
today. We're going to put in front of you on the screen your inquiry statement that you've provided to us, and Miss Wildgoose will be doing that in a moment. It's SBPI 00018. But as we do that, do you see a black folder in front of you at the moment? There's going to be a hard copy of that in front of you as well. So if you feel at any time you want to refer to your statement or anything there, you've got the hard copy and you have freedom to refer to it. When I'm going through it, I'll tell Miss Wildgoose and she'll bring it up on the screen.
No bother.
But you'll probably only be able to see the specific passage that I'm interested in. Could we look at we see there that the witness statement from yourself was taken on the 8th of December last year. And could we look at the final page, please? Sorry, the final paragraph would be better, thank you. Yes. So this is page 6. You'll see paragraph 17 that it says, I believe the facts stated in this witness statement are true. I understand that this statement may form part of the evidence before the inquiry and be published on the inquiry's website. And then you'll be able to see in the hard copy, we can see on this copy that you've signed that, but the version on the screen has been redacted, Mr. Rowe, so that no one can see your signature. But you accept that that was signed by you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then just below that, please, if we can go down slightly. You also provided a map, a satellite view on the 5th of April this year with some marks on it. Thank you. Are you happy with your statement?
Yeah.
Thank you. Can I ask you about the 3rd of May 2015 and primarily, first of all, Temple Hall Avenue? I understand you were working as a taxi driver.
I was, yes.
And what were you driving?
Ford Transit taxi,
What
Ford
colour
Tra-
was that?
silver.
And it was a quiet morning, I think you
Yes.
said in your statement. Was there much traffic about?
Very little, very little.
And you were at work
Yeah, yeah.
looking for customers, were you?
I'd started work at 4 o'clock that morning, so I'd been sitting up at Temple Hall at a rank at Temple Hall and had decided to move along towards the hospital just before 7 o'clock.
And I think you describe yourself as nosy, but I might say observant.
Yeah.
Right. And tell us what you saw in Temple Hall Avenue.
As I was driving along Temple Hall Avenue towards the end, just before the turn off to the left for Alloway Drive, I had seen Mr Bayou crossing the road at the bottom of Alloway Drive, heading towards the mini roundabout on Henry Road.
I think what we'll do is bring up a map
Yeah.
on the screen. I'm using the scene overview. Now, are you able to see Henry Road goes from north to south in the middle of this map? Temple Hall Avenue's on the left, and you've already circled it. That's excellent. Oh,
Disappeared there.
it's disappeared. Press again. So tell us what you've circled.
That's where I first saw Mr Bayou. He was crossing the road,
Which-
just at the bottom of Alloway Drive.
Right.
I was travelling east along Temple Hall Avenue.
So you were along Temple Hall Avenue travelling towards Henry Road.
Yes, that's correct.
And where was Mr Bayou when you saw him?
Crossing the road at the bottom of Alloway Drive, just pretty much bang on in the middle of the circle. I've
At that
placed.
junction?
Yes.
When you say crossing the road, what road was he crossing?
It's hard to explain here because Alloway Drive would come right down to the junction there of Temple Hall Avenue, but I've noticed that it doesn't actually say Alloway Drive.
No, but we can see, if we follow that white road up,
Yeah.
we can see it comes to
Yeah, it comes to Alloway Drive, yeah.
So where was he when he was crossing the road? What road was it he was crossing? Was it Temple Hall Avenue or Alloway
No,
Drive?
he was crossing the junction of Alloway Drive.
Thank you,
on the
sir.
pavement.
Describe him for us at that time, please.
A black gentleman, white t-shirt, dark trousers, jeans. Not quite sure what the garments were.
What height was he?
I think I've said in my statement 5'11" to 6 foot.
And describe his physique.
A muscular build. Obviously looked after himself.
What was he doing?
Walking towards Henry Road, mini roundabout.
Was he carrying anything?
Yeah, he was carrying a knife.
Describe how he was carrying that.
In his left hand.
And could you hold, you've gestured with your
Yeah.
left hand, can you hold that up slightly so everyone can see? Was he holding the handle?
Yes.
When you say he was holding a knife, how can you describe for us how he was holding it? You've said he was holding
Well,
it in his hand.
as he
but-
was walking, it was in his left hand.
Right.
So just with the walking motion.
Could you describe the knife for us?
Large blade, size-wise, I can't remember from my statement if I've given a size or not, but it was a large bladed knife.
I wonder if you could look at something for me, please. Miss Wildgoose will hand a plastic container to you. You can hold it, you don't need to take anything out. And at the same time, she's going to put on the screen a picture of what's inside that container. Do you recognise that item?
I personally couldn't say if that was the knife or if it wasn't the knife. All I saw was a large bladed knife, so I couldn't say yes or I couldn't confirm or deny if that was the knife.
Do you remember now the length of the blade that you saw?
Large, I would have said 6-7 inches.
Thank you. What was your impression of the man at that time?
As I said, Mr. Bayou was walking down the road, walking with purpose, I would say. Definitely wasn't strolling. He was like he had somewhere to be or somewhere to go, is the best way to describe it.
What speed were you doing?
20. But as I said, obviously, when you're a taxi driver, you're kind of looking for business everywhere, so you kind of slow down. So maybe 15 to 20.
How far were you from Mr. Bayou?
In metres, maybe 20 metres. From obviously being on the road in my taxi to where Mr. Bayou was on the pavement, I would say probably 15 to 20 metres.
And then did you pass him?
Yes.
And after you saw him, what is it you did?
I phoned the police
And why did you call the police?
because obviously there was a man walking around the streets with a knife.
And do you remember which number you used to call the police?
I do actually. I had a bit of a panic and I ended up phoning 101. To this day, I don't know why I phoned 101, but I phoned 101. Got the police nonetheless, but thinking now, 999 would have been... I think it's because I'd seen a police... I was behind a police van earlier on in the shift and I'd seen the 101 in the back, and I think it had maybe just stuck in my head. And in the sort of... at that moment in time, it was just phone the police.
That was at the forefront of your mind?
Yeah.
So when you made the call to the police, where were you?
Just at the end of Temple Hall Avenue at the mini roundabout at Hendry Road.
Could we have the scene overview back on the screen, please? So again, could you point onto the screen? Tell us where you were. So where number 2 is?
Yeah.
Did you stop to make the phone call?
Yes. No, sorry, my apologies. No, I didn't stop to make the phone call. I was on hands-free.
Right.
As the taxi had, obviously, the hands-free capabilities.
Thank you. I'd like you now to listen to a recording of that call, and that's PS 400001, and also to have a transcript in front of you.
In order that we can transfer you to the right person or department, you now have the following 4 options. Please press 1 for lost property inquiries, 2 for custody inquiries, 3 if you know the name of the person or department, or stay on the line to speak to a service advisor.
Good morning, Police Scotland. How can I help?
Good morning. I've been just sitting along Temple Hall Avenue in Kirkcaldy, and I've just spotted a black man with what looks like a huge blade walking along Temple Hall Avenue towards the Hub Garage.
Sorry, a black male with a blade? You saying a sword?
No, like a big kitchen knife.
All right. And what was he doing with it? Was he waving it about, or?
Just walking along the road with it.
Just take some details then from you. What?
Does that sound familiar to you?
Yeah.
Is that your
my
voice
That is
that
my
we
voice,
hear?
yeah.
And you gave the information to the police that day. It was a big kitchen knife.
Mm-hmm.
And is that the call you then made from your car with the hands-free?
That's correct.
Could I ask you to look at some evidence video timeline, please? I'm going to look at a very short segment of this from phase 1, which is 070920 to, so that's 9 minutes past 7 in the morning, 20 seconds to 33 seconds. You'll see, before we do that, I'll just explain to you what you see on the screen. On the left hand side at the top, you'll see a grey rectangle which says real time, and it's 7:09. At the moment it says 24, that's fine. And then there's some dark red numbers underneath, 101 calls and 999 calls. When a 101 or a 999 call is made, you'll see that light up.
No problem.
And then beneath that, there's some dash cam footage that we've heard comes from Temple Hall Avenue, that was taken from, that was fitted to the windscreen of a car. So we'll just play that. It's a very short segment, just for a few seconds. Thank you. Is that the man that you saw?
That is, yes.
We've heard that's Temple Hall Avenue. Is that, do you recognise that?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Is that far from where you saw Mr. Bile?
I saw him probably about 150 metres further back.
Right. When you say further back, do you mean closer to Hendry Road, or?
No, closer to the Temple Hall area, the Temple Hall
Closer to
shops.
Temple Hall.
Yeah.
Thank you. After you made your call to the police, what did you do?
I went back to work. I just after I'd made my phone call, I drove along Henry Road, and there's a taxi rank at the health centre at the hospital, and I went and parked up there.
Did you have conversations with any of your colleagues?
When I first arrived at the taxi rank there, I'd picked up a customer very quickly. Somebody had come from across from the hospital and jumped in the back of the car, so that I'd went and continued to do said job.
Where were you when you next saw Mr. Bio?
Once I dropped the hire off in Miller Street, which is the top end of Kirkcaldy, I had driven along Dunakeer Way to the top end of Henry Road.
I wonder if I could get the map
Yeah,
back
of course you
on
can.
the
No
screen,
worries.
the scene overview, and you can point out where. Right.
Is there any way we can zoom out?
There we go.
A little bit more? More yet still?
It would be
It's going to struggle now,
absolutely
yeah.
fine if.
Yeah, it's going to be a struggle now.
Okay.
We're on the top right of the screen there, West Galatown. That was the area, up towards that area I dropped off.
So I can see that in the top right. You can put a red circle around that.
Yeah, it's actually a little bit further up to the right.
All right.
But
But it's from that general area.
that general area.
And then can you tell us where you were when you saw the man? We can zoom in again if
Yeah.
that's easier. Right, I wonder if we could zoom in, please, Miss Wildgoose. Now you can move
actually
these
try and
red
move that now,
circles
yeah.
about if you touch the red circle again, you can move it around and adjust the position. So the red circle with the 2 in it is now at the junction with Hayfield Road and Hayfield Place.
That's correct.
Where was the man when you saw him?
Just literally past the junction, in between the junction and the cemetery, but
And
quite close after the junction of Hayfield Place.
could you point out the cemetery, please?
The cemetery is the big grey area that you see, so it's there.
So he was, when you say past the junction, you mean
More closer to where I've put the number 2 is where I saw Mr. Bayou last.
right. Can you describe him at that time?
When I saw him for the second time,
Yes. on
he
this
was
occasion.
walking back towards Henry Road.
What side of the street was he on?
He was on my left as I was heading east, so he was on the left-hand side of me.
So you're on Hayfield Road, heading east. That's to the right-hand side of the screen. And he's on the other side of the road from you?
Yes, left-hand side.
What direction is he moving in?
Heading back west.
Towards
Along-
Henry Road.
Yes.
How far away was he from you at that time?
Under 10 metres?
Did you notice anything about his demeanour at that stage?
No.
Could you see the knife?
No.
Were you aware of any other vehicles in the street at that time?
There was other vehicles on the road at that time, but colours and makes I couldn't tell you.
Where did you go after that?
I went back and sat at the taxi rank at Whitemansbury Health Centre.
Did you have a conversation with one of your colleagues?
Yes.
there? What's his name?
Andrew O'Connor.
And what were you saying?
That I'd seen a gentleman with a knife walking about the streets.
Did you tell him anything about what Mr. Bio had been doing?
No, as I said, when I saw Mr. Bayou, he was technically just walking.
I wonder if you could look, please, at another statement for me. And that's PERC 00010. And you'll see that this is a statement with your name on it, Mr. Rowe. And if we can go down the page slightly. You'll see it was taken on the 4th of May 2015 at 19:25, so 7:25 in the evening. And it was taken by investigator Karine Pattenden.
Mhm.
at your home.
Yep.
And as well as Miss Pattenden, that you were in the presence of DSI Dodd and Mrs. Emma Rowe.
That's correct.
And if we can just ask you before we move on, do you remember giving that statement?
Yes.
Do you remember the PERC investigator and the police officer being in your house?
Yes.
And were you trying your best to tell the truth that day?
Oh, of course.
How was your recollection then on the 4th of May compared to now?
I would like to think that as it was fresh at the time, back in 2015, would be better than 7 years later.
Thank you. And do you remember on that day if you were given the chance to either read over your statement or to have it read out to you to make sure you were happy with
I believe it was read out to me.
And were you asked to sign it or confirm that you were happy with the statement?
That I can't remember.
I'd like you to, I think first of all I'd like you to look at, if you could give me a moment. Unfortunately, I've not put the number on. Hold on a second, please. His PERC statement, please. I don't seem to have it here. His, the one from the 4th of May. Sorry, if you could just give me one moment. In penultimate paragraph, Miss Wildgoose, so it's probably at the end. And if you could go down slightly, go down the page slightly. Right, this paragraph says, I then continued on my way to Kirkcaldy Hospital. And then the second line says, I then made my way back along Dunnacare Way and down Henry Road towards the garage. I did this as I thought maybe he was en route to the garage and I became concerned. I neared the roundabout and made my way down Hayfield Road. As I did this, I observed the same male on the left side of the road in between Hayfield Place and the bus stop. I could see this male straight on. He was walking up the street towards the bus stop. I did not see any knife in his hands at this time. As I continued past him, a marked police car with sirens on and blue flashing lights passed me. I continued on parking at the health clinic where I stopped and had a short conversation with Andy Connor. And minutes later I saw an ambulance with sirens and blue lights pass me. Do you remember saying that to the
Yes.
PERC investigator? And was that correct?
Yes.
And you mentioned the bus stop. I wonder if we could go back to the map for a moment. And I would like you to point out on Hayfield Road where the bus stop was in 2015.
Bus stop is roughly.
So if you could point out the bus stop. If you need to move any of those other circles to do so, please just tell us.
Roughly about there. We're at place number 4.
So you've now repositioned the circle with number 4. And which side of the road was the bus stop on?
The left side where the green grass area is.
So if you were travelling from Henry Road along Hayfield Road, it would be on the left-hand side.
That's correct.
Near the grass area. Then I would like to ask you something else that you mentioned in your statement, please. If we could go back to your statement. Your inquiry statement, please. And paragraph 13. Thank you. So this is your inquiry statement, paragraph 13, then you'll see that on the screen. And you say, you refer to your perk statement and say, I remember noting that it was raining at this time and he looked to be soaking wet. Describe what the man was wearing on his top half.
A white t-shirt.
What were other people wearing that day?
I honestly can't remember.
Do you remember what the weather was like?
Overcast, I would have said at the time. I don't remember having my windscreen wipers on at the time, so I don't know if it was actually raining at the time.
Do you remember I showed you some footage a moment ago, and we could see windscreen wipers on a vehicle where the dash cam was taken? Did that help you remember what the weather was like at all?
Yeah.
How was his clothing compared to other people who were around that day?
In what way?
He was dressed in a t-shirt and jeans. How did that compare to what other people were wearing?
Well, I said the customer I picked up from the health centre at Whitemansbury had a jacket on.
Could we go back to the footage, please? At 7:19 and 41. Miss Wildgoose will just take a moment to get us to that stage.
Go ahead.
So if you look at 40, stop that please.
Roger, Hayfield Road.
Stop please. Did you see that vehicle travelling from Henry Road turning into Hayfield Road?
Yeah.
Do you recognise that vehicle? Do you want to see that again?
If you
Because
could play that
quite
again,
quickly.
it went to go quite fast.
We could maybe rewind and go back, please. So this is a
Go ahead.
vehicle travelling from Henry Road turning into Hayfield Road.
Was taken walk at Hayfield Road.
Pause.
Roger, Hayfield Road.
Sorry. Do you recognise that vehicle?
Yeah, I'd say I thought we'd moved to the new transit vans, but that seems to be one of the old London taxis.
When you say we, what?
As in the company I worked for at the time, I thought we'd changed to the newer Ford Transit, but from the picture there, that looks like one of the older London taxis.
So
Dark grey.
do you actually recognise that vehicle?
Yeah.
Who was driving that vehicle?
I obviously couldn't see who was driving the vehicle.
And then can I clarify one thing with you, Mr. Rowe? You've described seeing the knife on different occasions. You've mentioned the left hand, you've mentioned the right hand. When you first saw the man at Temple Hall Avenue, what hand was the knife in?
Left, furthest away from me.
When you saw the man later, what hand was the knife in?
I didn't see a knife when I saw him later on. No.
So it was definitely the left when you
hand.
saw him when you
Yep.
were on Temple Hall Avenue.
That's correct.
I think that's all. What does this say? Thank you very much. I've got no further questions for you.
Are there any applications in respect of this witness? Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Rowe. That's the end of your evidence. You're now free to go.
Thank you very much, sir.
Now, Ms. Graham.
The next witness will be Linda Limbert.
Perhaps before she gives her evidence, we could have a short break. It's 11:15. We'll have a 15, 20-minute break at this point. Good morning, Ms. Limbert. You're going to be asked questions by Ms. Graham. But before that, I'll ask you to take the affirmation. Will you repeat these words after me? I solemnly, sincerely, and truly
I solemnly, sincerely, and truly
declare and affirm
declare and affirm
that I will tell the truth,
that I will tell the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Ms. Graham.
Miss Limbert didn't raise her right hand, and actually I'm not sure if that's...
It's not the practice to raise the hand when giving an affirmation.
Exactly. I'm forgetting. Thank you. Miss Limbert, can I go straight to your statement, please? I think that might be the best place to start. So this is SBPI 00079. And we see there that your name is Linda Limbert, and you've provided the inquiry with a statement on the Thursday, the 28th of April. That was the date that the inquiry team have noted there. Is that right?
Yeah.
And can you go down the page slightly, Miss Wildgoose? And we've got all your contact details. They're known to the inquiry. And you tell us that you're a qualified nurse.
I am, yeah.
What is your job?
Presently, I work in a minor injury unit at St Andrews 1 day a week. I retired in November, but I've taken on a part-time job 1 day a week.
And in 2015, where were you working?
I was a staff nurse in the emergency department at the Victoria Hospital in Kirkcaldy.
Thank you. I'm going to take you through some of the things that you've already told us in your statement. As I do that, particular paragraphs will come up on the screen in front of you, but I just want to draw to your attention the black folder in front of you, and there's hard copies there. So if you prefer to look at a hard copy and see what else is in your statement, please feel free to do so. Okay. That's at your disposal. Okay. But if I'm going to ask you a specific question, it'll come up on the screen, and you'll be able to see that. And am I right in saying that you provided the statement to the inquiry team in response to some questions that were asked of you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And can I confirm that you... Could we look at the last page, please, Miss Wildgoose? And you'll see at paragraph 55, it says, I believe the facts stated in this witness statement are true. I understand that this statement may form part of the evidence before the inquiry and be published on the inquiry's website. And although you can't see your signature there on the screen, you'll see in the black folder that the copy you have shows your signature. Okay. And you've signed every page of the statement, haven't you?
Yeah.
And you signed it on the 6th of May this year. Right. Thank you. I'd like to begin by asking you some questions about your journey to the hospital on the 3rd of May 2015. And you've told us a little bit about that in your statement, and that's available for the chair to consider. How were you travelling to work that day?
By car.
And was that your own car?
Yeah.
Can you tell us what colour it was?
Silver.
Silver. And what type, what make, model?
It's a Peugeot 208.
Right. And in paragraphs 9, 10 and 11 of your statement, and Miss Wildgoose will just bring them up on the screen. We won't see all of them on the screen at once, but you can see where we are.
Mm-hmm.
You've told us that you saw a black male crossing Hayfield Road.
That's right, yeah.
Would you be able to tell the chair just a little bit about where you were when you first saw that man?
So you come along Temple Hall Avenue and turn right to go down the hill. There's a little mini roundabout, and then you turn left to go into Hayfield Road. And he was crossing Hayfield Road and was on the road, which prevented me from turning left to drive along. So I had stopped my car, more or less, on the roundabout, if you like, at that point.
I'd quite like to look at a map, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So Miss Wildgoose will play a scene overview. And just so you can see what's on the screen, going from top to bottom, north to south is Henry Road.
Yeah,
You see the
that's it.
yellow line going down? And on the right of that is another yellow line, which is Hayfield Road.
Yeah.
And that's in the middle of the page, west to east. And so you've told us you were near a mini roundabout. Can you point out where the mini roundabout was?
Yeah.
Just touch the screen.
Yeah.
Right, so that's at the end of Hayfield Road, at the junction with Henry Road.
Yeah.
What direction had you come from?
Down the way. So
Down Henry Road?
Down Henry Road, yeah.
And where were you intending to go?
Left along Hayfield Road.
And you've
Like my
mentioned you
left,
stopped.
Sorry?
You've mentioned you stopped the car.
I stopped the car just at the roundabout, just before I couldn't turn left because he was on the road.
Why couldn't you stop? Why couldn't you turn left into Hayfield Road?
Because the chap was on the road.
Where on the road?
In the middle of the road. He had crossed from where the houses are across the road and was on the road.
Could you point on the map to where the houses are?
Sure.
So as you've turned towards Hayfield Road, they were on your right.
They would have been on my right if I had turned on to Hayfield Road, yeah.
And you say he crossed the road.
And he crossed from that side too. And
Was he in your lane when you turned into Hayfield Road?
I never turned into Hayfield Road.
When you stopped at the roundabout? Was he in the left-hand lane as you faced
Yeah.
Hayfield Road? Describe the man.
From what I remember, it was a black male, and I remember he wore a white t-shirt. I think he had dark trousers on. That's all I really remember. What he looked like.
What about his height?
It was, to be honest, I can't remember that. But
What
he
about-
was well built. He was a big,
Did you notice anything else at that point? What was he holding?
What I thought was a knife in his hand, and he was started to approach my car, and that's when I saw what I said was a knife.
What hand was the knife in?
From what I remember, I think it was his right hand.
And how far were you from him when you saw the knife?
He was almost approaching my car and touching the door handle. So I don't know how far that would be, but from me to you probably.
Sorry, I didn't hear.
From as
between us?
Yeah.
From me
yeah.
to you, did you say?
Yeah, I think so.
Can you describe the knife?
I thought I thought I could draw it at the time, and I drew what I thought I saw. Flat and shiny is what I remember, and large.
When you say large, what do you mean?
Well, I thought it was quite large. I think I said it was about 20 centimetres, but I don't.
Thank you. You mentioned the door handle. Tell us which door handle you're referring to.
He approached my passenger side of my car.
Was that the front passenger
Yeah,
side?
my front passenger side. Aye.
Was he as close as the door? Did he get to
He
the
never
door?
got to the door, no, because I took off literally. I drove over the it's a little white mini roundabout, and I drove over that.
How
get
far
in.
was he from the door when you drove away?
In my mind, almost touching it.
How did you feel at that point?
Very frightened.
Other than approaching the front passenger door, what was the man doing?
He was just like he was charging at my car with his arms flailing about. That's the only way I could describe it, really.
Can you explain to the chair what you mean when he was charging?
Running fast and flailing his arms about.
What do you mean when you say flailing his arms about? Could you demonstrate
Yeah,
that for the
just
chair?
throwing his arms about like this.
Right.
That sort of thing. Only way I could describe it, really.
Okay. And did you form any impression at that time as to his mood or his demeanour?
No, just that he was frightening, and I could have felt like, you know, had to get away, and that was what I did. And then I just drove down a little bit down the road and stopped and phoned the police at that point.
So what direction did you go in? You
Back-
said a little bit down the road. What
Back
road?
down Henry Road.
So if we look at the map again, which remains on the screen, you told us about the roundabout. You'd come down Henry Road. You were at the roundabout before you turned left onto Hayfield Road. Are you saying you're still on Henry Road?
Still on Henry Road. I drove over the mini roundabout, and it's Henry Road all the way down into the town.
And what did you do after you drove in further down Henry Road?
I stopped my car and I looked in my mirror because I was frightened he would follow me, and then I phoned the police at that point.
Can you point out on the map where you stopped your car?
Just at the junction, just before Myrtle Crescent, really. About just up before the junction.
Just before the junction that we can see with, is that Myrtle Crescent?
Yeah.
Thank you. When you, before I turn to the call, when you were at the roundabout and you saw the man come towards the front passenger seat, was there anything you did at that point before you drove off?
The only thing that I did was because I didn't know that I was locked in my car at that point. What I remember is my previous car, I have buttons, and I just did like that to put my buttons down to try and make sure that nobody could get in my car, but that particular car doesn't have that. And that was probably why I took off, because I didn't realise I was locked in my car at that point in time.
So you're gesturing with your right elbow, are you?
Yeah, I went to just put the button down because my previous car had a button. It was an older car, this was a newer car.
And did that button automatically close all the door?
I think later on I found that out, yeah.
I'd like to ask you, after you, before I do that, do you think you'd recognise the knife again?
I don't know. No.
I wonder if you could look at something for me, Miss Wildgoose. I'll hand it to you. It's in a plastic container. And at the same time, if we give Miss Wildgoose a moment, she'll put a photograph on the screen of what's actually in the container. You can pick it up and touch it. We won't be taking it out. And Miss Wildgoose will put a photograph on the screen. Do you recognise that?
That's similar to what I drew.
Thank you. Well, let's look at a handwritten version of a statement, which is PERC 00526, please. And you'll see that this is has your name on the front. It's a statement by PERC, the Police Investigations and Review Commissioner. Do you see their logo at the top? And it says on the right-hand side, witness statement. And the names, personal details given are your name, Linda Limbert. You see that?
Yeah.
And then if we can look at the final page, page 4. And do we see that it says on the screen, I have provided this sketch to help with my description of the knife that the man was carrying.
Yeah.
And there's a drawing on the left there.
Yeah.
Who did the drawing?
I did the drawing.
You did the drawing. And then further down on that page. It says, I wish to confirm to the best of my knowledge that this is a true and accurate statement of my observations. Do you see that? And now what I'd like to do is move on to the call.
Yeah.
And what we're going to do now is play an audio tape, which you'll hear in this room. And at the same time, you should have a transcript in front of you, which will be in the black folder. And Miss Wildgoose will arrange for that to be done. So the audio tape is PS 00006.
Please, what's the address of your emergency?
Hello, there's a man with a knife, a black man on Hayfield Road in Kirkcaldy. Just at the roundabout.
Hayfield Road in Kirkcaldy?
Just at where Whitehead the pub is.
Whitehead pub?
Yeah, it's called Gallagher's now.
Right. Did you say it was a black man?
He's a black man, he's got a white coloured t-shirt on and he's carrying a huge big knife. And he nearly got...
Right, he's in Hayfield Road, did you say?
Yes, in Kirkcaldy.
Gallagher's?
Beside Gallagher's, yeah.
Gallagher's, is that a pub?
It is a pub, yeah. I'm driving away, like I've just carried on driving. I'm at my work, I work in the casualty at the hospital.
Right, have you got a description of him?
He's a black guy, that's all I can tell you, because when I realised he was trying to stop me, when I realised what he had in his hand, I just drove.
Right, where's he heading towards?
Well, he was at the roundabout. He was walking along Hayfield Road at the roundabout.
And he's outside Gallagher's pub. What's your name, please?
I'm Linda Limbert.
Linda?
Limbert, Limbert.
That's great, Linda. Thanks very much.
Right, okay then, thank you.
Bye.
And is that the call you made to the police?
Yeah.
And was that a 999 call?
Yeah.
And is that your voice speaking to an operator from Police Scotland?
Yeah, must be. I recognise it.
And you said a moment ago you were on Henry Road when you made that call. You're nodding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And during the tape, the audio tape, it says, he's a black man, he's got a white coloured t-shirt on and he's carrying a huge big knife and he nearly something. And I wonder, do you remember what it was you were telling the operator at that
Just
point?
approaching my car, I think, just try to get in my car. You know what I mean, that's what he was...
Okay. And when you said to the operator, because when I realised what he was trying to stop me and I realised what he had in his hand, I just drove. And is that what you told the police?
Yeah, I just literally drove over that mini roundabout and to get away.
Where was the man when you last saw him at that stage?
At the roundabout, really. You know, but there's not much difference, not much distance, I suppose, between him crossing the road and being on Hayfield Road and then stepping towards my car. Mm-hmm. That would just be...
I wonder if I could ask you to watch part of an evidence video timeline, please. And Miss Wildgoose will arrange this. There'll be something on the screen. I'll just explain to you. So you'll see in the top left-hand side of the screen that it says real time, 7:13. So that's 7:13 on the morning of Sunday the 3rd of May, 49 seconds after the hour. You'll see that there's two buttons there, one for 101 calls and one for 999 calls. When a call is made to one of those numbers, it'll light up. And then you'll see 4 tiles or windows in front of you on the screen, and they'll all be playing at the same time. The bottom left is dash cam footage taken on Temple Hall Avenue from a vehicle that was driving there. The middle bottom is from an iPhone footage.
Ms. Graham, is it not Hayfield Road?
Oh, sorry,
said
yes,
Temple
sorry, I'm
Hall.
at the wrong time. Thank you very much. This is at Hayfield Road, sorry. So the bottom left is dash cam footage from a vehicle. You'll see in the left-hand bottom you can see part of a bus stop on the left. And the middle one is iPhone footage. Again, you'll see in the middle at the bottom from the same vehicle. The bottom right-hand footage is from a van. And the top right-hand side of the screen is footage from a camera fixed on Gallagher's CCTV footage from Gallagher's pub. And you'll see in the distance in that footage that there's a roundabout, and beyond that we've heard that that's Hayfield Road. So this is footage from that area taken at 7:13. And I would ask that part of that be played at this stage to let you see this footage. We'll just play that, thank you.
I see him. I'll put her on the phone.
Might want to turn around soon, there's a car behind us and all.
Go that way.
Turn round now. Now. Just turn around that wee bit there, right? I think use your dash cam on it as well. Aye, mate, that's fine. Just in case.
Go that way.
Oh, shit.
Right.
And if we can pause it there, I'm going to ask Miss Wild Goose to take us on to 7:16. If we could go back slightly, please. So just to show you this screen, that's the time's now changed to 7:16, so we've moved further forward. One of the buttons has lit up, the red 999 call button, and you'll see footage from the dash cam, which we've heard is on Henry Road outside the Shell garage. You'll see the Shell garage on the right of the dash cam, and then on the other side, the right hand side of the screen, you'll see that this Gallagher's CCTV footage has moved down, but it's from the same position towards the roundabout leading to Hayfield Road. And if we could play from this time, please. You may hear now at 7:16 and 36 seconds the start of the call that you made to the police.
Right. I need you to divert to Henry Road, a disturbance ongoing, male armed with a knife. African looking male chasing someone that may be carrying a knife. Described as big with muscles, about 6 feet tall, wearing a white t-shirt and dark coloured jeans. There's an individual coming in about standby. Yeah, well, that's another grade 1 call coming in for the Victoria Road, Kirkcaldy, male armed with a knife. Male in possession of a large knife, a black male wearing white t-shirt and jacket, walking along the street with a large knife in his right hand, about a 9-inch blade.
Control for 411, I want all units to defend bear in mind officer safety.
We can pause it there, thank you. And I'm going to ask Miss Wildgoose to rewind prior to 7:16, so to about 7:14:30. And what I'm going to do now, Miss Limbert, is ask Miss Wildgoose to play this footage, but to perhaps pause it at certain moments as we go through. And you comfortable? You understand what you see on the screen? Yeah, good. So we'll start playing that now. You'll see the dash cam footage shows a white van, the rear of a white van. This is taken on Hayfield Road. You'll see in the distance there Gallagher's pub. Do you see that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the CCTV footage from Gallagher's pub again shows the roundabout in the distance at Hayfield Road. And if we could just play that for a moment, please.
Just in case. Go that way. Right.
Tell me, it's actually on the between Penny Road thing, and he's saying it to various cars.
Emergency service.
Please.
Do you need hire, police or ambulance?
Police. Police.
The police, thank you.
Thank you.
You are now connected to the Police Scotland 995.
Police, what's the address of your emergency?
I'm not actually too sure what the address is. There's a guy in the middle of the street with a knife in his hand.
What street is he in?
Just along to the hospital, heading towards...
Can you pause it there, please?
Police, what's your address?
All right. I'm going to explain to you what is on the screen now, Miss Limbert. Do you see that in the Gallagher CCTV footage? Did you see a figure moving towards the roundabout? And maybe we'll need to go back and play this
I think I see
again.
something, but I don't see
Right.
anything.
I'll ask Miss Wildgoose to rewind slightly, and you'll see the shape of a figure moving from Hayfield Road towards the roundabout.
Yeah.
And then a vehicle arriving. Now, you may also be assisted by the tile which is in the top centre, which will show a blue dot. You'll see a blue dot. Do you see that near the roundabout?
Yeah.
And we've heard evidence already that this is to signify someone moving in the scene that we can see. So, first of all, I'd ask you to look at the CCTV footage, and you will see movement from Hayfield Road towards the roundabout and a vehicle. And I want to just play that, and then I'll ask you some questions. Is that okay? Right, thank you very much, Miss Wildgoose.
just along to the hospital, heading towards...
I need to know what's...
Police, what's your address of the emergency?
I just phoned a second ago.
Right, pause that there, please. Did you have time to see that part of the CCTV footage?
Yeah.
And do you recognise what can be seen there?
Yeah.
Tell the chair, please.
A figure with a white t-shirt on, I think, and a silver car driving over the roundabout.
Whose silver car was that?
Well, it would be mine, I would think, at that time, because it was about 7:15 when I phoned the police.
And so the figure we see there moving with the white top, is that the man that you saw coming from Hayfield Road?
I think so, yeah.
And was that your
That's-
car that
I
we
think
saw?
so, yeah, at
Thank
that time.
Thank you. Did your car come to a stop? When you said stop, did it stop or did it pause?
I might have just, I slowed down. I couldn't turn. I thought I stopped, but it would only be, it all happened in seconds. So I think I stopped just for a second or 2 seconds, and when I realised as he was approaching my car, I drove off.
Thank you.
So
after you called the police Did you go to work?
Yeah.
Thank you. When did you arrive at the hospital?
5 minutes after, no more than 5 minutes after I would.
Did you find a different route to get there?
Yeah,
And how were you feeling when you arrived?
quite shaken.
And did you speak to anyone about what had happened?
I wouldn't know, I wouldn't remember who, but yeah, my colleagues when I got to work, yeah, when I was in the...
And then I wonder if we could go back to your inquiry statement, please. And we'll look at paragraphs 17 to 23. You won't see all of them on the screen, but you'll see paragraph 17, you start talking about the shift that you were on at the hospital.
Yeah.
And if we can just pan down slightly from 19, further down the page. Go on to the next page. And do we see that you tell us in the statement about Shekubayo's arrival at the hospital?
Yeah.
Do you remember how it was he was brought to the hospital?
In an ambulance on a stretcher.
What was your involvement with him when he arrived?
Well, I had been allocated to accept the emergency that was coming in, that we knew was coming in for Hayfield Road, and
And what part of the hospital was he treated in?
resus, the resuscitation room is in cubicle 1.
Did you recognise him at that stage?
When he came in, yeah. I mean, I don't know him, but I recognised him as the guy that I had just seen in the street.
At the roundabout?
Yeah.
Describe how he was at that time.
Well, I was unresponsive and he had ongoing CPR from ambulance and police at the scene.
Were police present?
Plainclothes police were present, I recall, yeah.
What did they tell you about his condition?
They didn't. It was the paramedic, Alan, that did the handover. What exactly he said, I couldn't recall at the time until I read my statement, and then...
Is that your original PERC statement?
Yeah, I think, I can't remember where it's what I said, but it was after I reread my statements. Yeah.
And when you mentioned the paramedic, was that Alan Finlayson?
I think so, yeah. I can't remember Alan saying them.
Can you tell us what your role was in the treatment of Shekubayo?
Just involved in the field resource, so helping the doctors and take my turn doing CPR.
And have you given us details about all of this in the statement, paragraphs 24 to 31? Yeah. Do you remember now what information you were given about the patient?
I'd need to read it, yeah. I'd need to read it. Because I remember that he did have handcuffs on, but I didn't remember what they were until I read my statement.
Where was he handcuffed?
His hand at the front.
To the front.
On his, you know.
Did you have any discussions about the handcuffs when he arrived at the hospital?
Not that I wouldn't remember. Mm-hmm. No, when you had to get them off, obviously, so that we could get access. So.
Did the handcuffs interfere in any way with the treatment that was provided at the hospital?
Well, they had to be removed, but I wouldn't say they interfered. But they had to come off.
And you've talked about providing CPR, and you weren't the only person. Can you tell us a little bit about the CPR that was given at the hospital?
And just, what do you want me to say? We do CPR.
Is it more than one person that
There's
was
more than one
it?
person. There's somebody doing chest compressions. There's somebody doing airway until we've got the definitive airway of intubated them.
When you say someone doing airway, what does that actually mean?
I mean, somebody's got an ambumag and a mask and attached to oxygen and give, you know, you do 30 compressions to 2 breaths initially until you have your definitive airway, and then you can do continuous compressions after that.
So that's a mask placed over the mouth of the person?
Yeah.
And are you pumping a bag?
Yeah, an ambubag it's called. Yeah.
An ambubag. And does that pump oxygen into their lungs?
Yeah.
Were you helping with that?
I wasn't involved in airway. It was a doctor that was doing the airway.
But you were doing the CPR?
I would help do CPR at intervals, yes.
Is CPR when you're compressing someone's chest?
Doing compressions on someone's chest, yeah.
Was there anything about, we've heard that Mr. Bile was black, and was there anything about the fact he was black that you needed to consider when he arrived at the hospital and was assessed and treated?
Not that I'm aware of. Just
We may hear in the future about a condition called sickle cell anemia. Was that something you needed to consider?
It wasn't something that I considered, no, not as a nurse, no. It was just getting on and dealing with his resuscitation.
So the priority for you was the resuscitation?
Absolutely, yeah.
Was he restrained or held in handcuffs when he arrived at the hospital?
Yeah, he had handcuffs on when he
How
arrived.
long did he have them on?
Seconds, just as long as it took us to get them off.
What about any other restraints to his leg?
I don't recall anything else.
You've talked in your statement in relation to paragraphs 35 to 38. You'll see the heading of these paragraphs is respiratory arrest and cardiac arrest. Can you explain to the chair what the difference is?
Just what I wrote. Respiratory arrest when the patient stopped breathing for a prolonged period of time, and cardiac arrest when the blood flow stops and the heart's no longer working.
So is respiratory arrest restricted to the lack of breathing?
Yeah.
But the cardiac arrest is the failure of the blood to flow through the system?
Yeah, I'd say that's...
Can you have one without the other?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
So you can stop breathing but your blood still flows?
Yeah, your heart could still be beating for a little while.
And what's the purpose of CPR? Is that to keep the blood flowing?
Keep the blood flowing and obviously oxygenating the blood as well. So it's oxygenated blood that's getting pumped around the body.
So the CPR allows the oxygen to go into the body and mix with the blood and move around the body?
If there's oxygen...
Even if the person's not breathing? Independently?
Independently.
Thank you. How long did you remain with this patient, Mr. Bile?
Until life was pronounced. Excellent.
Can I ask you some questions about a machine that was used? Now, this is at paragraphs 42 and 43. And the heading here is Lucas machine. Is that how you say it, Lucas?
Yeah.
And you say you would call it a thumper. Is that how it's known in the hospital?
Yeah, I think so.
So if we hear people using alternative terms, should we understand that's the same thing?
Yeah.
Tell us what you do with this machine.
It's in 2 halves, and you put one underneath their body and one on top, and then there's a piece of it that presses on your chest wall, and it's automatically pumps. So it's a sort of mechanical CPR.
Can I ask you to look at paragraph 5, please?
Going back.
I think this is maybe a typo on my notes. Can we look at the PERC statement, please? Treble 018. I'm looking at the wrong statement, Miss Limbert. If you could just give us a moment, Miss Wildgoose will bring that up on the screen. And this is the PERC statement that you mentioned earlier. If we could just go back to the first page for a second, you'll see that this was taken on the 13th of May 2015 at 13:45. And if you could go down the page slightly, Miss Wildgoose, you'll see it was taken, not that far, sorry. You'll see it was taken by a DSI Miles within the A&E department at Victoria Hospital in Kirkcaldy. Do you remember giving this statement to DSI Miles on that date, the 13th of May?
I remember I gave a statement at the hospital, yes. I didn't know who to, but...
Right,
yeah.
thank you. And again, were you asked to confirm that the statement was accurate? Was it maybe read over to you, or were you allowed to read through it?
Yeah, I think so.
Were you asked to sign it, or just to confirm that it was correct?
I can't remember, but I think I would have signed it, I think.
Okay,
I can't remember. I don't.
And can we turn to page 2, Miss Wildgoose, please? And paragraph 5.
Here we go.
And you'll see on the screen in front of you that there's a paragraph that begins, Jackie James was shouting the 2-minute cycle, after which adrenaline is administered by a doctor.
Yeah.
Do you see that?
Yeah.
And it says, I held his right arm to get IV access to his right arm, but the access only lasted momentarily. And then I got IV intravenous access to him via his left arm. I honestly do not know what else was tried, as everything is happening quickly. We had some problems to get the thumper machine around his chest, so the manual compressions were continuing in between. On the first occasion, the thumper was on too low on his chest, and on the second occasion, the clips weren't successfully applied, so rather than waste time, manual CPR would continue. I'd like to ask you, first of all, do you remember giving that statement at the time to the officer?
I wouldn't remember anything I said 7 years down the line, but that's what I've said. That's.
Thinking back now, do you remember that there were issues with the thumper machine?
To be honest, I don't remember, but it can happen, yeah.
Can I ask you about the final sentence? On the first occasion, the thumper was too low on his chest. Can you tell us where would the thumper normally be on a person's chest?
On your chest, like more up here, rather than lower down.
Right.
So just between your nipples, just on the centre of your chest.
Between the nipples.
Yeah.
And you said it was too low. And then, so that would be below the nipple area?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
And then on the second occasion on that statement, you say the clips weren't successfully applied. Tell us about the clips. What are they?
Well, it's in 2 halves, so you have to put one part underneath and then one part on top, and then you just clip it on, really. That's essentially that. So I can't actually remember why they couldn't go on. It may have caught on clothing. It could have been anything, a reason like that, if he's been wearing something and that's maybe not went through properly.
Do the clips go around the person or onto the
No,
clothing?
they're just attached to the machine. The machine's like in 2 halves and you just clip.
So are the halves independent? They're not hinged in any way?
I think they are hinged,
Oh, they
yeah.
are hinged.
I think they are. Yeah, I think so. I can't remember. I've not worked in A&E for that long now, so I don't know.
But in any event, manual CPR continued at that time.
Yeah.
So did that allow you to continue moving the blood round his system?
Hopefully, yeah.
So was it a problem that the thumper machine was too low and then the clips weren't successfully applied? Was that a problem, or was it okay that the CPR continued manually?
No, it's okay that we can carry on with the CPR, but we did get the thumper on, if I recall rightly, but only the latter end of the resus, not at the beginning.
All right. So that all worked later?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
don't know what else to...
When he first arrived at the hospital, I appreciate it was 2015, but now do you remember him having any injuries to his head or his face or his body?
I don't recall anything that I can think of, no.
Was there anything that you're aware of that the doctors did that could have caused injuries to Mr. Bio?
Doing CPR could cause it. Getting IV access can cause like wounds, if you like, holes in your arm while you're getting a cannula in so that you can get access to a vein for medications.
What sort of injuries could CPR cause?
Well, you could fracture ribs doing that.
What ribs could be fractured with CPR?
I wouldn't honestly know what ribs could be fractured, but obviously that would have to be determined later. But it has been known to fracture ribs, and I know I have. Doing CPR, it can happen.
Right. We may hear from others about that later. What type of injuries can be caused when you're attempting to gain IV access?
Bruising, holes where you've used the cannula. I think there was an attempt to get an arterial line in his groin, so there would be a wound there, and then I know there was a wound, one attempt that I've read from a statement that we access on one arm, but it failed. It must have tissued, so we tried access on another arm. So we'd have 3 wounds that I know of anyway.
When you're attempting to gain IV access, where on the person's arm are you trying to, where on Mr. Bio were you trying to get access?
Normally in the crease of your elbow, groin for trying to get access to artery, or radius trying to get access to artery, or they may go in at the neck if they were trying to get access.
And in the area of the groin, what area are you referring to?
Like which side?
Would it be at the front of his body?
Oh yeah, at the front, yeah.
At the front of his body in the groin area?
Yeah.
Do you remember with Mr. Bio which side?
I remember I was mostly on his right side, I feel, when I was in there.
So it would have been his right side?
Yeah, I think it would, yeah. Could be lying on the trolley, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
If you could just give me a moment. Thank you very much. Miss Limbert, that's been very helpful. Thank you.
Are there any applications in respect of this witness? Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Ms. Limbert, for your evidence. You're now free to go.
No, thank you.
Now, Ms. Graham, the next witness.
This will be Colin Gill and will be taken by Malerna Jr., Ms. Thompson.
Good morning, Mr. Gill. You're going to be asked questions by Ms. Graham, who sits at the end of the table. Before that, I'll administer the oath. If you raise your hand, please. I swear by Almighty God.
I swear by Almighty God.
That I will tell the truth.
That I will tell the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Ms. Thompson.
Thank you.
Sorry, I said you were going to ask Ms. Graham, but in fact, Ms. Thompson's going to ask you a question.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. What is your full name, please?
Yeah, my name's Colin Gill.
How old are you, Mr. Gill?
I'm 41 years old.
I believe that you're an Airwave Services Coordinator with Police Scotland, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you're based in Glasgow?
Yeah,
And that your role involves the analysis of use of airwaves by Police Scotland?
that's part of my role, yeah.
Part of your role. Am I correct to understand that your role is a civilian one?
That's correct.
So you're not a police constable?
I'm not a serving police officer, no.
And that you've held this particular position since 2014?
That's correct.
Although you've worked in this area since 2008?
That's also correct, yeah.
And that you hold a university degree, a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science?
Correct.
Mr. Gill, there's a black folder in front of you, and inside that folder you will find a copy of a statement that you gave to a member of the inquiry team on the 18th of March of 2022. Do you see that there?
Yeah, I see that.
If we could have that on the screen, please, Miss Wildgoose. It's SPBI 83. Can I take you, please, to page 17 and paragraph 40? It's the final paragraph on the page, and it reads, I believe the facts stated in this witness statement are true. I understand that this statement may form part of the evidence before the inquiry and be published on the inquiry's website. Do you see that?
Yeah,
And on the copy before you, do we see your signature at the bottom of the page?
I do, yeah.
And the date, the 9th of May of 2022. In fact, have you signed every page of the statement?
Yes, that's correct.
Before you did so, Mr. Gill, were you given the opportunity to read over the statement?
I was, yeah.
And you were happy with it? You didn't make any changes to it?
I may have made a couple of amendments to this particular statement was provided by an audio call, and I believe in the during the transposition of that there was a couple of words that were incorrectly transposed, which has to be corrected.
I see. So any corrections that may have been made to the statement were carried out before you signed it?
Correct.
You didn't need to take your red pen to it?
No, that's correct. Yeah.
All right. Also in front of you should be a copy of a statement that you gave to an investigator Taylor of the Police Independent Review Commissioner on the 14th of February of 2018.
Yeah, I see
Do you have that to hand?
I do, yeah.
It's not my intention to take you to either of those statements, but they're there before you, and if you would find it helpful to refer to them when you're giving your evidence, you're free to
Okay,
do so.
thank you.
I want to begin by asking you some questions about Police Airwave. Am I right to understand that Airwave is a communications network used by the police and indeed some other emergency services?
Yeah, so it's the primary method of communications between police and other emergency services in Great Britain, so Scotland, England and Wales.
I'm going to ask you some questions about how it works. What equipment would an officer need to make or receive a communication over airwave?
So every officer is issued with a personal handheld radio. They typically wear that on a carrying device on their shoulder, and that airway radio is assigned to that officer for the duration of their duties, and they can use that for the purposes of making and receiving airwave calls.
Are there also radios within police vehicles?
That's correct, yes.
Where are they positioned within the vehicle, do you know?
It does vary on the type of vehicle, depending on what space is available within that vehicle, but they're typically placed in the dashboard area of the vehicle, where the drivers or the passengers can see which talk group is currently being listened to, which channel of radio is currently broadcasting.
Are they fixed rather than handheld?
They are fixed in vehicles, yes.
I'm going to ask you some questions now about the different ways that an officer can use a radio to communicate over airwave. You mention a number of these different facilities in your statement, and I'd like to ask you firstly about a group call. What's a group call?
So a group call is a one-to-many call where one party of that call can speak at any given time and many people can listen to it. So the speaking party can be an individual officer, it could be a call from a vehicle radio broadcast by that officer, or it could be the control room who broadcast on that particular talk group. And as I say, one person can speak at one time on a group call. So the speaking party will pass their message and multiple people will be able to hear it.
So one person speaks and many or multiple individuals receive the transmission.
That's correct.
Who are the multiple or many individuals who receive that transmission? Is that what a talk group is?
Yes, that's what a talk group is. So when the officers turn their devices on, they'll move to a particular talk group. Sometimes these are geographically based, depending on where the officer is working. Sometimes that might be by function for certain specialist officers. And the officers will move to, they'll have a selection of talk groups that they use routinely, and they'll move to the appropriate talk group for that particular duty or area that they're covering. And anybody that is affiliated to or listening to that talk group will hear any messages that are passed on that talk group.
Are you familiar with the Kirkcaldy 1 talk group?
So at that point in time, and that was the talk group that was used to cover the area of Kirkcaldy.
It covered Kirkcaldy. Did it cover a wider geographical area than that?
I don't have that knowledge, I'm afraid.
So should we understand that officers working within a team would have a talk group that was common to them within their particular geographical area? Would you expect their radios, their handheld radios, to be tuned to that particular talk group?
That's the normal operation, yes.
And that would allow officers to hear transmissions made by other users of that talk group, as well as any transmissions from the control room to that particular talk group.
That's correct.
Are transmissions over a talk group monitored by supervising officers?
They can be. They can be monitored by the shift sergeant or sometimes the inspectors, and the control room supervisors can also listen to those talk groups.
And can any officer who's tuned into that particular talk group make a group call?
That's correct.
How does an officer make a group call? What would he or she have to do to the radio in order to put out a group call?
So on the device itself, there's a button to the side which is called the push to talk button. The officer would press and hold the push to talk. When they do that, the device issues them a tone. It beeps effectively to confirm that the connection has been made, and that's their indication to start speaking. When they release the button, again the device beeps to indicate that they've released the button, and that's the end of their call.
Can more than one person speak at the same time?
Not on a group call. If the talk group is busy, when somebody else attempts to press the button, they'll get basically a warning tone, a call denied tone, indicating that they can't broadcast because someone else is already broadcasting.
If an officer made a call to their talk group out of doors on a windy day, might that affect the audibility of the transmission to those who were listening to it?
It can do. The environmental factors play a part in what can be heard on the talk group. So wind noise, for example, road noise can affect the quality of the speech. Vehicles travelling at speed, the presence of lights, or not so much lights, but sirens in the background, again, that kind of noise can be transmitted on the talk group.
And if the control room made a call to a talk group and a member of that talk group was outside trying to receive that message on a windy day, again, could the environmental conditions affect the audibility of the transmission?
Absolutely.
You've told us about the group call function. Can you tell the Chair now about point-to-point?
Yes, so point-to-point is a function where two devices can communicate directly with one another. There is effectively a calling party and a receiving party. So each of the Airwave devices has an individual short subscriber number or an ISI number. which is effectively like a telephone number for that device, but it's 7 digits long. The officers would make a point-to-point call by dialing the ISI number of another party. So you would dial the ISI number of the person that you wish to speak to and press the push-to-talk button to activate the point-to-point call. The receiving party then, their device rings, almost like a mobile phone, and they again press the push-to-talk button to answer the call. They can then have a conversation between one another using the push-to-talk at the start of each of their sentences, and that call is between those individuals. It's not like a group call. It's not overheard by others on a talk group. So it is an individual call between those two officers.
As you say, it's more akin to making a mobile telephone call.
It's similar.
The difference perhaps being that there's still a need to press the push-to-talk button before speaking.
That's correct. And again, it's a one at a time. It's not a duplex call. So in a telephony call, where you can effectively speak at the same time as the other party, within point-to-point, it's not. It's a single call. So again, one person presses and speaks, and the other listens, and then they respond.
I see. So there's no scope for people talking over one another.
No, there's not.
One at a time. Did I understand correctly that, again, to make such a call, you would be using the same button, the push-to-talk button, before you speak? And you said these calls are not monitored, so the area control room, for example, wouldn't be able to hear any transmissions made point-to-point.
The only exception to that is where one of the parties of the call is the area control room, which is also a function that's available to area control room.
Moving on from point to point, can you tell me about outgoing and incoming telephone calls?
Yeah, so the devices are capable of making telephone calls. They can make an outbound telephone call to any telephone number. There are some premium service numbers that we restrict for obvious reasons, but the ability to call landline or mobile telephone numbers exists from those devices. The devices can also receive inbound telephone calls from numbers within Police Scotland's network. So they couldn't receive a telephone call directly from a member of public or from your own mobile phone, but they can receive calls from Police Scotland desk phones, for example.
Okay, so incoming calls only from the Police Scotland network, but outgoing calls to any number.
Correct.
Again, are the outgoing and incoming telephony monitored by control room, or would they be private calls?
They would be private calls.
You've told us, Mr. Gill, about voice communications, so we've got the group call, point-to-point, incoming and outgoing telephone calls. Am I right to understand that the police radios can also be used to send data communications?
That's correct.
Via airwave? Can you explain to the Chair, please, how that works?
Certainly. There are two primary functions for data. There is the ability for the devices to send a short data code or a status message. Predominantly those are used by officers to provide a very short and quick update as to their status. So they've arrived at scene or they're marking themselves clear from that particular scene. And they do that through pressing and holding a button, a specific button on the device. And that sends a short coded message through to our command and control systems within the control room. And those messages can be used to update command and control with the officer's status without them having to broadcast that they've arrived. They can do that at the touch of a button. The second function is the sending of SDS messages, so more akin to text messages. And we predominantly use that for automatic resource location. So the devices are set up to send via SDS message the ARL messages to show the location of the officer's radio at that given time. It uses GPS to capture the data and sends that via a text message to automatic resource location.
So that happens automatically without an officer having to purposefully update control room as to their whereabouts?
Yeah.
And may I take it that the purpose of that is so that control can map the location of officers at any given time? So those messages, the status messages and the SDS messages are all received by the control room?
They're received within systems, yeah.
Returning to the status messages, are these preset codes? that
So
are the
there's
same? Sorry.
Sorry to interrupt. Yes, there's a national configuration for status messages. All the devices are programmed in the same manner, so that the buttons, they're typically the numbered keypad buttons on the devices, are allocated a specific status message so that officers are familiar with which button does what status.
So you gave the example earlier of arrival at scene. So that might be, for example, that a particular numerical button corresponds to arrival
Yes,
at
that's
scene.
button 1 in the circumstances. Yeah.
Can you give other examples of what the status messages are?
Yeah, so we use button 4 for clear, which means they're available to be moved on to other duties. Button 8 is typically for refreshment. They're the predominant ones that are used.
I want to move on now to ask you about the emergency activation button, and I want to ask you questions about what happens after that button has been activated. Do the area control room know if an officer has activated their emergency button?
Absolutely.
How do they know?
When the officer presses the emergency activation button, it sends a message, it sends a status message, an emergency activation status to the control room, which would automatically update command and control where the officer is assigned to an incident. That incident is automatically upgraded to a priority incident by the presence of the emergency activation status coming through. Where they're not assigned to an incident, it automatically creates one for that officer as an urgent assistance incident where the officer requires urgent assistance. That happens automatically at the press of that button. The devices are also configured to open up the microphone of the device on the talk group that they're affiliated to, and it starts to automatically broadcast without the officer having to press the talk button, and it does that for periods of time.
So it becomes hands-free,
Yeah.
essentially. I'll ask you more about that in just a moment. You've explained how the area control room come to know when an officer has pressed the emergency activation button. What about other officers in the same talk group? Would they know that it happened?
They get similar signalling, so the devices that are on the same talk group will receive an audible tone. Their screens typically turn a kind of red colour to indicate there's an emergency activation ongoing, and the devices themselves vibrate to indicate that there is emergency activation ongoing.
Does this happen both on a handheld set and also on the vehicle sets?
It does.
You explained that after the button has been activated, it allows the person who has pressed the button to broadcast on the airwave for a period of time. I believe it to be around 10 seconds.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
And that's referred to in your statements as a hot mic.
That's correct, yeah.
So that allows an officer to speak. The airwave is his or hers. What would happen if somebody else tried to make a transmission during that 10-second period?
The only person that can override the 10 seconds of hot mic, as it were, is the control room. So the control room maintain the ability to override at all times, and that's to allow coordination of resources. They have the ability effectively to cut off the 10 seconds of hot mic, and sometimes that can be done inadvertently, where the controller instinctively reacts to the emergency activation and presses their button to seek to assure that the officer is okay. Where another officer attempted to broadcast during the emergency activation, if the hot mic is open, they'll get the call denied tone indicating that the talk group is in use and that they need to wait.
And at the end of that 10-second period, the airwave returns to normal, as it were, and anyone could then make a transmission.
The functionality is restored until the actual emergency activation is cleared by the device that started it. All of the activity that happens thereafter is classed as emergency activation, and effectively the calls are within that period of time whilst the talk group is still in its emergency state, will be recorded as part of the emergency activation until the officer clears it on their device.
How would an officer clear it on his or her device?
So on as you look at the device screen on the right hand side underneath the screen of the device, there's a soft key which would display exit, and they press and hold that button to cancel the emergency activation.
Do the control room have the facility to clear the emergency status?
They have the ability to acknowledge it, but they can't clear it from the device. So the officer that started the emergency activation must clear it from their device.
Can I ask you to look at a photograph of a handheld radio set? This is PERC 01176. This is a police radio. Is this familiar to you?
Yes, absolutely.
I wonder if you can help us to understand the different parts to it. I think we can see a screen on the front. That's probably quite obvious, but you will find, Mr. Gill, if you press the screen, a little circle will appear, and that will perhaps allow you to point different things out to us.
Sure.
So, just for the avoidance of doubt, if you could perhaps point to the screen so we can all be clear as to the location of the screen. And this is the screen that you explained that during an emergency activation by another radio within the same top group will turn red.
That's correct.
And there will be flashing. Is that right?
The screen itself will go red. It doesn't. The screen doesn't flash, but it will illuminate in a red colour, as opposed to it's normally a kind of blue colour.
Sorry, that I misunderstood. I think you perhaps said it vibrates.
It vibrates, yeah, it does.
All right, that's my mistake. So that's the screen. We've heard much about the push to talk button. Where's that?
Yeah, so that's this button here.
That's the button you've explained would be used both for group calls and for point-to-point. And am I right to understand that the only time that an officer would not need to have their finger or thumb on that button during a group call would be after they have activated the emergency
That's
button,
correct.
when they have this hands-free hot mic period for about 10 seconds. Do we see the emergency button on this radio?
It's just slightly out of view. It's actually it's on the top of the device, in between the rotary dial that you'll see there and the antenna itself. It's located on the top of the device and is orange in colour.
The rotary dial, is that just beneath the circle?
That's correct, just beneath circle 3. Yeah.
What's the purpose of that?
It allows for volume adjustment, so it turns the radio volume up and down.
You mentioned there being a button that would clear the emergency status of a telephone.
That's correct.
Sorry, of a radio. Where do we see that?
That's that button there.
I think those were the main ones that you spoke about in your evidence, but are there any other buttons that are of significance that perhaps I haven't drawn your attention to?
The only other difference is around about the use of telephony. When dialing a telephony call, it's more like a mobile phone, where the officer dials the full telephone number, and then they would press the green key to dial the call, and then again the red key there to end that call. And then the keypads displaying the numerical buttons 1 through 9 are for the sending of messages and other functions.
Thank you. We can take that down, Ms. Welgus. Thank you. Finally, I'd like to ask you just a few questions about the recording of voice communications. You've explained that both voice communications and data communications can be made over airwave. So far as the voice communications are concerned, are they recorded?
There's 2 sources of recording of airwave activity. We have a functionality called bulk recording, which a service that we procure from Airwave, which allows us to maintain clean recording of particular talk groups. And by clean, what I mean by that is that it monitors the talk group and records absolutely all traffic that it hears on that talk group. And then we have a second source of recording, which is the operator workstation recording within the control room, and that will record all the voice activity that they are involved in. The controllers will multitask. They'll have multiple talk groups potentially on screen at any time. They can also receive inbound calls, and sometimes the audio can be slightly confusing as to what is being listened to if all of that's happening at the one time. And so we use bulk recording to be able to strip out the talk groups and be able to listen to them cleanly, to give us an indication of what the officers on the ground heard. They don't have that ability to multitask and to have to have multiple streams of audio coming in. They only have the one talk group that they're listening to. So that's where we use bulk recording to provide that clean kind of evidential copy of audio recording.
I see. So you could, for example, strip out everything other than the transmissions made to, let's say, the Kirkcaldy 1 talk group.
That's correct.
On the 3rd of May 2015. So that would give you a recording of those airwave transmissions, the voice transmissions, and would strip out everything else that might have been going on in the control
Correct.
room at that time. You said earlier that point-to-point calls between two officers wouldn't be recorded, but if a point-to-point call was to or from someone in the control room, that would be recorded.
That would be recorded in that second source that I described, the workstation recording. There would be an audio recording of that call from the control room.
Is that because you record every voice transmission made by an individual within the control room?
That's correct.
So it matters not whether they're making a group call or a point-to-point, or whether they make an outgoing call or they receive an incoming call, that will be recorded.
That will be recorded in the control room, yeah.
So it would only be private calls between two officers, point-to-point or regular telephony, that wouldn't be recorded.
That's correct.
So we should understand then that any group calls over a talk group will be recorded in the manner that you have described. And for the avoidance of doubt, would that also include any emergency transmissions made after activating the emergency button?
That's correct.
Earlier in your evidence, when I first asked you about the handheld sets, you made a gesture and you patted your shoulder to indicate where they are located on an officer's uniform. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, so the devices are fitted with some form of shoulder attachment device, and effectively the officer has a clip on their uniform. It's typically in the shoulder area, sometimes it's slightly further down on their chest, and that allows the radio to effectively dock onto their uniform so that they don't need to hold it in their hands.
I have no further questions for you. Thank you for your time.
Thanks.
Are there any applications in respect of this witness? Well, thank you very much, Mr. Gill, for coming and giving evidence. You're now free to go.
Thank you.
Before we start for lunch, I want to stress to legal representatives the importance of complying with the timetable for making Rule 9 applications. The timetable requires sufficient time for the inquiry solicitors to process the applications, for counsel to the inquiry to consider and respond to them, and where the legal representative, having received the response of counsel to the inquiry, wishes the application to be placed before me, then I require sufficient time to consider it, and if necessary to consult with the assessors, and then issue a decision. And in addition, when additional documentary productions are required, the evidence manager requires sufficient time to include documents in the day's bundle. So it is important to comply with the timescale, and I'm sure you'll all bear that in mind. So thank you very much. We will sit again at 2 o'clock.